Trudeau comes out complaining that people can't get their news about wildfires and evacuations on Meta products. That's Instagram and Facebook. This can all be alleviated if Trudeau would back down on Bill C-18. Now, Trudeau is denouncing Meta's news block as fires force evacuations. This all wouldn't be a problem if Bill C-18, which was warned that this would happen, didn't go through and get royal assent and become law in Canada. Now, it hasn't gone through its regulatory process yet, but Facebook has jumped the gun and said, we're going to block news products in the country ahead of the regulation because, well, they don't want to have any, retroactive. Well, it has been the law. You owe this much money now retroactively once this regulation goes through. But Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is complaining. Now, this comes after, on the weekend, people were not able to get information. Now, people weren't complaining at Meta. They were complaining to Justin Trudeau on other social medias and on Facebook, where people like to share this kind of news, but they're not able to because those links are now blocked. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau blasted social media giant Meta on Monday over its decision to block local news as wildfires continue to force thousands of Canadians from their homes. Right now, we're in an emergency situation where up-to-date local information is more important than ever. Well, it shouldn't have passed this legislation. This is the kind of thing that is not, well, people are going to need this kind of news, but this was essentially a shakedown, and we'll get into that. Facebook is putting corporate profits ahead of people's safety. No, Justin Trudeau is putting news agencies' legacy profits ahead of people's information, and this is what's going on. Ahead of the quality local journalism. This is not the time for that. Well, it wasn't the time before. I mean, we had plenty of time to repeal this legislation ahead of these forest fires, but the Trudeau camp decided not to do that. He said during a stop in Island Montessori Academy in Cornwall, PEI on Monday morning. Now, the problem here is that this was essentially a shakedown. The law came in to say that old legacy media outlets should be paid for them to just show up in your feed. Now, this is something that advertisers pay good top dollar for, to be shown in your Facebook feed or any other social media feed, Twitter feed or whatnot. If they want to have that put out there, that's something that a lot of companies would pay top dollar for. But instead, Trudeau's administration, Trudeau's cabinet has put forward and rammed through this law, by the way. They canceled debates on it. They said, no, we're no more debates. We're ramming it through, make it legislation, despite the entire industry coming out and saying this will be horrible because what's going to happen is people will block the news on their websites, and this is exactly how it went down. Now, if a news agency is one of the official news agencies, because this is part of the legislation, is shown in somebody's feed, then the social media company itself will have to pay the government. In turn, the government will pay those agencies, divvy it out and put it out there, and this is where we're at with this. But these are the words of Justin Trudeau today as he was on his complain tour.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Going back to your comments about Facebook, the company is only responding to your government's legislation that was passed earlier this year. So will you back down or change on C-18? Because they're saying that that's why they're blocking news.
The legislation we passed says that companies like Facebook that share local news on their sites, that allow people to share local news, should be sharing themselves some of the profits they make from advertising.
Yeah, so right there, he's got it backwards. He's got it completely on its head. If they allow people to share news, this is a thing on most social medias. Most people don't realize this. Like when you put links to anything on, say, on a YouTube video like this, when I put a link to get people to go onto another website, that actually is not good, and they're allowing people to do that. The website would prefer not to have people diverted off of their website, and this is the thing. They were allowing it, and now they're no longer allowing it because they're being told they have to pay to give people the privilege of that.
On Facebook, from sharing that information. It is Facebook's decision to put corporate profits ahead of allowing Canadians to access the news.
So these aren't corporate profits. We're talking about cutting into what they already earn. This is a tax, essentially. It's a shakedown. It's a new levy on them. It's not corporate profits. So what they're doing is actually the fiduciary responsibility of the shareholders is avoiding these extra costs and externality that the government's putting on them. So they're just avoiding this by complying with the regulation that Trudeau's government put forward. And again, people told them that this was going to happen, and they did it anyway. They actually, Pablo Rodriguez was counting his money before the legislation had passed. And this is how incompetent they are, that they don't even realize that this is what was going to happen.
Instead of making sure they're paying their fair share of the advertising profits Facebook makes off of Canadians with the professional journalists and local news organizations that keep Canadians informed, they are choosing to block access to their sites or access from sharing important local news. This is Facebook's choice. We're simply saying that in a democracy, quality local journalism matters, and it matters now more than ever before when people are worried about their homes, worried about communities, worried about the worst summer for extreme weather events we've had in a long, long time.
Yes, it has been the worst summer for arson. We've been seeing lots of arson going around. These weather events, it's actually been quite a cool summer, but there has been a lot of stuff. Now we're going to get into SaintJean and what she said about this. But before we get into that, hey, the store has been put up. So go check it out. We have a new store. We got Tamara modeling off some of the hoodies on the store for the Clyde Do Something products. Just got a few items on there just yet, but hey, go check it out. I'll put a link in the description. You can go check that out for yourself, but get yourself a hoodie or a t-shirt or a cap or a mug, whatever it is that you like. Go over there and go grab yourself one. Link in the description down below. Now, people on people on Twitter have been saying this is completely the government's fault in this whole situation. Sadly, you have 100% owned this, the Liberal Party failure, Pablo Rodriguez. You gave them two choices. They pick one that made the most sense for them. Demanding anything of them would be pulling your bill C-18, or your C-18 bill means little. Begging might work for you. This guy saying the government should be repealing Bill C-18 now. I live in the Shuswap area. We have a huge fire going on. People rely on the community Facebook pages to get current news and updates. They can't get any up-to-date news. It's a complete gong show. This mess is on the federal government. Absolutely, it's on the federal government. They need to get that. Now, Pascal SaintJean was the one who took over as the Minister of Propaganda, the Ministry of Heritage in Canada. It took over for Rodriguez, who was once running it, who was the one who brought the bill across. But she made a statement today, on Minister SaintJean. This is irresponsible. Facebook knows they have no obligations under the act right now. They have not participated in the regulatory process. No, they did. They said this is unworkable. Get rid of it or we will ban news in Canada. That's the end of the story. That's them complying with the regulation. They're not paying arbitrary fees. If they did, other countries would pull the same sort of racket, and well, they would just lead to the end of all social media as we know it. It would be over at that point. They would rather block their users from accessing good quality and local news instead of paying their fair share to news organizations. No, they are not blocking it. They are complying with the law that you wrote. So you can get rid of that law and they'll be free to get rid of that. Google and Facebook earn 80% of all digital advertising revenue. So it really is about money. It's not about getting people their news in a timely way. This is a shakedown. This is unfair. This isn't something you would do to any sort of market out there in the world. But the Canadian government is pulling this on on Meta and also Google. It's going to eventually roll out to Twitter, and all the other agencies will start complying. Now, this might send a lot of people over to Twitter in the meantime, because we've been able to get lots of up-to-date news on Twitter. So if you're a Facebook user, go check it out. Twitter, now formerly Twitter, it's now X here, but this is where you can get a lot of your news. The world is watching Canada. Other countries are looking at this and basically saying other countries are hoping to do the same sort of legislation. This is why they're so hard on it, and this is why they won't back down. They didn't back down for Australia, and they're not going to back down for Canada. Sorry, that's just the way it goes. Malcolm Twizzle on Twitter says, just once, I'd like to hear a liberal politician tell the truth. Before the government blocked Canadian news on Meta with C-18, Canadian media was already in decline because few were following it. And, well, a lot of it was just terrible news. Not that it was bad news, it was just poorly written news. And this is the big problem when the government buys out the media agencies, as they did throughout the COVID pandemic, and that has really destroyed news in Canada. It turned it into just a big propaganda situation. Meta provided a lifeline by carrying their content and driving traffic to it for free. Absolutely free of charge. They did it by organically growing on the platform, and they destroyed their own thing. There's this still no one's reading it, even on Meta, and now the government is using C-18 to force Meta to subsidize it. Meta did the right thing by protecting its business and refusing to pay these political games. SaintJean is deceiving. Drop the saber rattling and kill C-18 if you want to have any vestiges of news. Now, the one thing that's kind of ironic in this whole scenario is Rebel News is the only news agency that's allowed on Meta services right now. And that's because the federal government refused to allow them to actually file and register as a news agency. This was famously as Justin Trudeau refused to answer questions from them and said that they are not a news organization. Now they are the only news organization that you can get your news for on Meta services. They're still up. Large majority of Canadians now view Trudeau's carbon tax as just that. It makes life more unaffordable for nothing. Nothing for climate change. So this is what's going on with a lot of the people out there talking about Meta and these forest fires. They're saying, not only are we not able to get the news on here, but the climate change, it was not fixed. What they claim is the issue here with the news service, and they say that people are not getting news about this big climate issue. Well, I thought the carbon tax was supposed to solve that. That was the big life-saving grace here. Marty up north saying, I've just been reminded that this is a story from the foreign media. And this is another media story that came out just trashing Trudeau, and I'll get to that in just a second. But this is an unintended consequence of Bill C-18. Liberals wanted to control the media before the next election, and now they have no control over Canadian mainstream media. And this was this article from the Telegraph, which was interesting because they changed the title of this only like a day after it actually came out. The new title on this, because it was Trudeau Mania unravels as Canada grows disillusioned with the Liberals. They changed the article to now call it 8 years of hurt, Canada's growing fury with Justin Trudeau. But I'm running low on time for this video, so we'll get into that possibly in the next one. But hey, let me know what you think about this whole situation with Bill C-18 and people not being able to get the news about these wildfires and evacuation notices, things like that. If they're Facebook users, people are going to have to start switching social media platforms, but that may not even help in the long run, because if Bill C-18 stays the law, at some point later this year, they're all going to have to comply with it, and you won't be able to get any sort of news. In fact, more people will probably start turning to YouTube channels like mine to get news on what's going on, because I'm not an official news source. I could get the news for you, and you could pass it along that way. It'll have to be a word of mouth, a new age word of mouth way of going about it, and that's how we've been playing this game since the convoy, in fact, because, well, the news was lying to us in the first place there. Anyway, leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think, and we'll see you in the next one. Keep on trucking.